Not again, I said as Bobby yelled out, "Uno!" leaping out of his worn-out office chair, knocking it to the ground as he slammed his lost card onto the pile on the table. "That's the 5th time already!" Rachel yelled out in frustration. "Suck it!" Bobby yelled out, from the excitement from his massive Uno winning streak. "I'm going to get another beer," Steve said, standing up from his camping chair, which was more duct tape than chair at this point. As Steve made it to the kitchen, I yelled out, "Just make it quick. Let's keep some cold in the fridge, please." And today was Sunday, which meant it was our weekly friends' night, something we had been religiously following ever since Bobby graduated a few years back. We were huddled in my tiny bachelor flat, sitting on the random assortment of ancient furniture I'd been collecting ever since enrolling in university. We were tightly packed around an old rickety dining table in a pitch-black room. A single half-melted candle emitted a flickering orange light, just barely illuminating our faces, and giving barely enough light to distinguish between the numbers on the cards for our Uno game. Now, to an outsider looking in at this ragtag bunch sitting among my ragged assortment of various ancient bits and bobs in a pitch-black room, it must have looked like I simply couldn't afford the power bill. But that was actually far from the truth. I had a full scholarship to cover my studies and living, which is how I managed to sustain my hoarder-like tendencies of collecting the various strange artifacts dotted around the room. However, we were in what was colloquially called load shedding, or to the rest of the world, rolling blackouts. Every day for 2 hours the power would cut out, and that's if we were lucky. Recently we've had 3 sessions of load shedding a day, 2 hours a pop. It was torture, and it absolutely killed everything from the equipment on campus to the entire industry in the area. And the saddest part is it happened so often we started to get used to it. There was a time when we would experience maybe 1 or 2 load shedding periods a year, and we'd still complain. But now, if it was only once a month, we'd be grateful for that power-filled month. Our grid was simply deteriorating. I even heard our one and only nuclear power plant started to leak recently. But that's a fact I try not to think too hard about. So that left us in the dark, scrambling to find some non-electric way of spending the day, since our normal routine of binge-watching TV shows or sharing the random YouTube video just wouldn't work. Hence Uno, which was a serious mistake, since Bobby would not stop winning, and I was about 3 seconds from either throwing Bobby or myself right out the window. "Let's do something else, please," Rachel whined, and I was in complete agreement with her. Steve stumbled back into the room. He perhaps had 1 too many beers, which might have explained his next words. "Guys, why don't we just switch it back on?" I laughed. "Sure, why not?" I said, casually flicking the light switch on the wall behind me. "Oh wait, yeah, there's no power," I was saying in a rather overly dramatic way. But Bobby interjected. Actually, it might be possible. You know, with our government, they're so inefficient that they actually need to manually switch on and off the grid at the main substations." Steve then added on, "Exactly. Like we could just sneak in there and, flick a switch," he said, pointing at the switch I had just toggled, and Rachel gave out a huge smile. "That sounds like an adventure. I'm in." And Bobby chuckled and added on, "I'm game too." I sighed. We were perhaps a bit too drunk, but the idea did seem like a lot of fun. "Sure, let's do it." Now, this might just seem like some crazy drunk college antic, but it's not as far-fetched as it seems. You see, South Africa is somewhat of a lawless place. If you had a few bucks, you really could get away with just about anything. I remember once failing my driver's test, quite spectacularly, as I slammed straight through the orange cones highlighting the parking spot. The large, burly instructor turned to me and said, "Yeah, you're gonna be failing this one. But I could let you pass for, let's say, 1,000 rand. Now this might sound like a lot to you, but if you convert it, it's only $50. So that's the story of how the South African government officially licensed me to drive on our roads. And the other factor in this not being so tremendously stupid is Steve. You see, he's an electrical engineer, busy doing his masters, and he knew his way around our grid, and just so happens to have coincidentally visited our local substation around a month ago to do something or another. I'm not really sure, it sounded rather complicated.
Wait, are we really doing this?
Bobby snatched up his backpack from the corner of the small room and took out his keys. Yup, you suggested it. It's too late now. Time for some light treason. Rachel bolted out of her chair and grabbed Bobby's free hand as they headed outside to fetch his car, which was parked right behind my apartment. Steve stared at me with some sweat on his forehead, his eyes pleading for help. I could sometimes be counted on as the voice of reason, but not tonight. I was in one of those moods. The kind of mood that would usually find me the next morning waking up in a strange place, some weird smells in the air, and likely a police officer asking why I thought jury-rigging a small bomb or engineering a super virus was a good idea. Yeah, that did happen once. Don't ask too much about it. The legal department gave me an earful about misappropriation of funds. But in my defense, we did get a publication off of the spike protein I managed to integrate into that. On second thought, I should stop there before I get into more trouble. So looking back at Steve, I gave him a devilish smile and said, "Oh, come on, man, you know it's gonna be fun. Plus, I actually have this little actuator connected to an Arduino and a Bluetooth connector," I said while holding up this small black box. "Why don't we just install it under the switch, and then whenever we need power, I can just press a button and fix the little grid problem?"
Yeah, when I say switch, it's not like a movie prop switch. It's pressing a button on a computer.
Really? That's even better. I fished out an old flash drive from the piles of stuff in one of the corners of the room. I've got some remote access software on this. It'll be even easier. But Steve just sighed and said,
Do you really think that the super important computer controlling our power grid is connected to the internet?
Maybe?
Okay, technically it is, but it's got this massive firewall protecting it, so unless you fancy also breaking into the governmental servers and whitelisting yourself, it's not gonna work.
And then he immediately started to panic as he saw my expression, and added,
No, this is not a suggestion.
"Oh, but come on, dude. I did that to the campus servers already. What's one more time?"
No way in hell am I helping you break in to the government. Again.
A loud honk from outside interrupted our conversation, indicating that Bobby had pulled the car up to the front of the building. I hastily grabbed my keys and walked out of the door, with Steve trudging out behind me. I quickly locked the inner door, followed by the outer metal one. Then we headed towards the small white Volkswagen Polo idling in the street. We quickly piled into the cramped back seat as Bobby floored the car with a loud, "Yeah!" Okay, maybe I kinda lied about the part of this not just being some crazy drunk college antic. And we sped out of the small back road onto the main street and zoomed towards the substation. We arrived at the substation, and things seemed a bit odd. Let me paint you a picture of the scene so you can realize just how strange the whole thing was. It was a pitch black night. A new moon hung in the sky, with barely a star in sight. All the lights in the area, including that from the substation, were off, which was quite ironic for the place that supplied the power. We drove down a long tar road, only illuminated by the headlights of our car. The road was flanked with powerless light poles interspersed with jacaranda trees, spilling down their assortment of small purple blossoms. At least the ones that were still alive did. The twin beams of the car's headlight illuminated the large building as we pulled up to the front gate. It was one of the classic, old-timey South African governmental buildings, which meant tan brick walls accented with dull orange brick pillars. The building was surrounded by a grey concrete palisade fencing with a motorized steel gate. However, strangely, the gate stood wide open, like it was inviting us to come into the property. Now, I know I made a slight exaggerated point of how much of a lawless country South Africa is, but this was really weird, like immediate red flags weird. You see, we have this chronic problem in the country where people will steal power lines and smelt it down for the copper and the wires. So anything to do with power is pretty well guarded. And we were honestly counting on our very nerdy appearance, coupled with the beers and the couple $100 we brought along with us to essentially worm our way into the hearts of the guards and get in that way. Or if all else failed, we would use Steve. But there were no guards. The gate stood wide open, and peering past the fence towards the main building, dimly lit in the light of the headlamps, the main door stood wide open. Honestly, while our plan was, by the technical definition, treason, it was actually quite lighthearted and would at most get us a slap on the wrist. You see, the power here is really bad, but the rich people and the politician neighborhoods, they don't really ever receive power cuts, just us lowly peasants. A fact which annoyed pretty much any of the people that we might have to answer to for our actions. And furthermore, while the power is officially off for 2 hours at a time, it does fluctuate wildly between 0 minutes and indefinitely. Now, I know that's kind of a joke, but seriously, with the total amount of power outage time of 186 days this year, I cannot remember a single one of them that perfectly followed the official schedule's time. Which can somewhat be expected since it is manually turned on and off, so chances were that no one would even pick up on our little adventure. But this was serious. If the place was open like this, it meant only one thing: crime. The guards were gone, and everything is neatly opened, no signs of forced entry, leading me to one conclusion. It was an inside job. The guards left it open for them, an all too common occurrence here. Now, Steve's work is quite invested in the place, and if they broke the place, which they probably would, it would impact his studies quite a lot, and the area would lose power. Sitting in a dark city for months on end would be literal hell on earth. Plus, all of our research projects, with the exception of Bobby, the damn graduate, wouldn't be able to continue without power, putting it on an immediate hold. And this was something we absolutely could not allow. And guys, you're thinking what I'm thinking, right? Steve whipped out his phone, dialing 10111, the local police number. And the phone rang for several seconds and then disconnected.
Great, the towers are down again.
He was angry, but he spoke in a hushed tone. You see, the cell phone towers here are kept running through load shedding periods using diesel generators, which add a massive cost to the cell phone carriers, so it was not all too uncommon for them to go down with the power.
Bobby, you're with Telcom, right?
Nah, I'm with Vodacom, just like you, Steve. I pulled out my own phone, checking the signal strength. Now, guys, I'm with Cell C, but it seems like they're down too. Rachel then said in her usual cheery but ever loud tone,
Let's just chase them out ourselves. It'll be fun. Plus, we'd be heroes. Could even make the news.
I thought about it for a moment, but Steve added,
Well, what if they have guns?
But Bobby replied, That's quite unlikely. This looks like an inside job, so they're not expecting company. They probably left anything they didn't need behind, to speed up stripping the place clean. And I doubt they brought any serious weapons. I peered out from the back seat, making eye contact with Bobby, and then asked him, You brought him, right? Always, he said with this dangerous smile on his face. You see, back in the day, Bobby's dad was the chief of police in the region. Furthermore, he was an avid hunter, a trait both me and Bobby shared. And a rather large part of my interest in biological science came from my childhood days of shooting antelopes and dissecting them or using them in taxidermy. Bobby slowly pushed open his door, trying to make as little sound as possible, but the old hinges creaked in protest, possibly more so than normally since he opened it so slowly, drawing out that creak. I followed suit, followed by Rachel, who flung her door open with excitement and dashed out of the car, while Steve hesitated for a second, before shaking his head and slowly peeling himself out of the back seat as well. We walked around the car to the trunk, which Bobby deftly popped open, revealing its dusty, empty interior. He reached down into the upholstery covering the floor and pulled upwards, yanking out the floorboards, revealing the usual spare tire spot. However, this was not the standard arrangement. Instead of just holding the spare tire and some tools, there was a second compartment, a large metal compartment built in below the wheel well, with a heavy-duty lock holding its doors shut. Bobby fiddled for a few seconds with the nape of his shirt, extracting the chain necklace that was always round his neck. At the end of that silver chain hung a tiny key, which he placed into the lock and with a sharp snap, sprang open. He grabbed the handle of the now unlocked door and pulled it open, revealing a beautiful and well-maintained Star Mantlisher SM-12 hunting rifle, his dad's old Vector Z88 pistol, still sitting in a belt holster, several boxes of ammo, and 2 police-style flashlights, the kind with the heavy metal handles that could be used in self-defense. Bobby gently cupped the pistol in its holder and held it out towards me. I grabbed the holster, buckled it to my belt, drew the pistol, released its magazine with that satisfying click, and then gently pulled it from the gun's handle. I reached down into the car, grabbed the box of 9mm ammo, and started to fill the magazine with bullets. Bobby gently lifted out the rifle and took the .308 ammo box, loaded the shot into his rifle while keeping a few loose in his pocket for easy reloading if needed. This was actually the best option. He was always a better shot with a rifle, a damn good hunter, but I was always the better one at competition shooting. Steve was a tad afraid of guns, and even if our prodding never really got into it. Although Rachel was a pretty good shot, we only had 2 guns, and not to be mean to Bobby's girl, but she was a bit unpredictable, which isn't really something you want when holding a weapon, so this loadout made sense. Steve then grabbed the flashlights and held one out to Rachel. She took the flashlight, but then quickly scurried over to the side of the car, opening her door and rummaging around for a few seconds before returning. In her hands were a bottle of pepper spray and a small black and yellow taser. Rachel offered the pepper spray to Steve, which he clipped onto his belt.
Let's go be heroes.
Bobby chuckled and gave Rachel a quick peck on the cheek, and then said, "Okay, lights on." Rachel looked down and deftly flicked the switch on the torch, sending out a beam of light onto the building. Steve fumbled with his briefly before illuminating the building with another bright beam. Walking towards those empty doors felt really eerie. There were no sounds, no insects chirping, no familiar hum of electricity, just the footsteps of 4 idiots breaking into a seemingly empty substation. We finally made it to the front door of the building. The metal door looked in perfect condition, definitely no forced entry. We were walking in a single file, me in front, Steve behind me, Rachel following him, and Bobby in the back. I peered into the darkness of that doorway as Steve shone his light slowly around the room. Everything seemed normal. The reception area stood empty. A large wooden desk dominated the room, with an old CRT monitor above it, and a massive number of papers stacked into multiple piles. The room looked completely untouched. However, what really stood out was the 2 metal doors on the back wall behind the desk. One looked like a normal entrance which led down a corridor, but the other was a more heavy-duty kind, with a card reader mounted next to it. But both doors stood wide open, without any signs of damage.
What the hell? This isn't right. Even during load shedding, the interior of the building is powered. It has to be, otherwise you can't control the grid. And that door is supposed to be magnetically sealed, and it's on an external server too. That's not something that can be easily arranged by just bribing some guards.
Bobby looked at Steve and added, "Well, if it's so bad, they must have taken something important already. We need to hurry." And then, to everyone's surprise, Rachel yelled out,
"Come out with your hands up! This is the police!"
Steve glared daggers at Rachel. Even I was flabbergasted. But she just meekly said,
"Hey, maybe they'd run away now."
Steve and I both sighed, and I called out to him, "Okay, I guess they now know we're here. Steve, what would normally provide the backup power for the building, and how do we get there?" Steve paused for a moment, thinking through the problem, and then said,
"Well, the substation routes power from long-range power lines, transforms it, and redistributes it to the local area. The building's power is always on from the input power, but the connection out is turned off during load shedding. This means the inlets or the transformers are probably damaged. We should go to the transformers first. That's probably where the damage sits. If I recall correctly, we need to go down the more secure door, follow it down the hall, take a left, go up the stairs, another left, and then we get to the control room overlooking the transformers.
We all nodded at Steve, and then headed through the heavy-duty door. We slowly walked down the empty corridors, illuminated by the white beams of our flashlights. A tense atmosphere filled the empty corridors, and something was off. It was too quiet. Like there should at least be some bugs or some odd rats scurrying about. But everything was completely still. This eerie feeling washed over me as we approached the stairs. I looked back over and said, "Guys, is it just me or is it too quiet?" Bobby looked over at me and said, "Yeah, I get the feeling we're either too late and they've already stripped the place clean, or maybe Rachel's stunt actually worked and scared them off." Steve then added,
"Guys, I don't know, but something is off here. We gotta go look at the transformers and do it quickly."
I nodded at Steve and quickly bolted up the stairs, taking 2 steps at a time, causing loud footsteps to echo out around us. I was moving fast, faster than I really needed to, but I did this for a reason. We were tense, like really tense, so I walked loudly, adding some of our more normal energy to this tense scenario, in hopes that it might help break the tension. But more importantly, I just wanted to break the damn silence that surrounded us. We finally reached the end of the maze of corridors and made it to the control room. And just like every other door we'd encountered so far, the control room's door was open. We slowly entered the room, fanning out, checking the corners first, making sure we were alone, and then surveyed the area. The place looked perfect. There were these large metal rectangles standing upright in the center of the room, covered in a myriad of switches and cables, but every gauge on these boxes read 0, and every other display was off. The wall on our left was entirely made out of glass, looking out over a massive, pitch-black room. In front of that glass wall was a row of computers built into large desks, and every display was off. But the strangest part was everything looked pristine. No yanked-out cables, no stolen parts. If we weren't staring at this room through the twin beams of light emitted by our flashlights, I would have expected it to be running perfectly. Steve looked around and said,
"This doesn't make any sense. Everything looks fine. It's just off. They've either severed the inlet or damaged the transformers. Alright, let's go downstairs and check the transformers ourselves."
Steve then moved his beam of light around the room, highlighting the wide-open metal door on the other side of the room, his beam illuminating the metal walkway which lay behind it. We slowly walked towards the door, exited into the much larger room, the one cloaked in darkness that we could see through the glass window in the control room, and ahead of us a metal walkway carried off into the darkness. And to our left, facing the same direction as the glass window, stood a ladder heading down into the dark abyss below. However, much to our happiness, there was that distinct hum of electricity in the air, which gave us some hope that things might not be totally broken. Steve opened his mouth, intending to say something, but was interrupted by a faint moaning sound. It sounded like someone in a lot of pain. I grabbed the pistol in both hands, aiming down into the darkness below. Bobby did the same, while Rachel and Steve pointed their flashlights down, trying to find the source of the sound. Their beams frantically darted around the room, illuminating the 3 large transformers standing in the center of the room. But something seemed odd about them. There were these odd lumps sticking to their sides. Wait, is that a person? Bobby finished my sentence, looking closer at the transformers. Those lumps were the bodies of people clinging to the surface of the transformers, resembling how a large group of snails would cling onto a rock. There had to be at least 20 people hanging onto them, some at very unnatural angles. They were basically floating halfway up the transformers, somehow clinging to their basically smooth metal surfaces. This freaked us the hell out, and Rachel let out a sharp scream. But nothing happened. And the people didn't move, and the room quickly returned to that eerie stillness from before. Bobby called out, "Hello? Are you guys alright? Do you need any help?" But no reply. A few seconds later, another moan, followed by eerie silence. Steve and Rachel both seemed to be freaked out, and I could tell Steve was seconds away from bolting. Bobby looked the calmest of us all, and I hate to admit it, but I could kind of see why. This was something new, like never heard of before new, which meant fascinating. And I could see it in his eyes. They burned with the light of curiosity. And damn it all, but I could feel it reflected in my own gaze. "Okay, I'm going down there. You guys stay up here." Steve was about to protest when I added, "The hell you are, Bobby. Like I'm letting you go down there without me." After my words, Rachel seemed to give up on what she was about to say. I could tell she was going to protest at Bobby's crazy stunt, but now that I agreed with him, this was just us being us. And if she couldn't stop it, she might as well just let it happen. But Steve wasn't on the same page.
"Are you guys crazy? This is some SCP type shit. You're gonna get us all killed."
Bobby patted Steve on the shoulder and said in his most charming voice, "Oh, come on now. It's gonna be fun. Plus, we still gotta go check out the Transformers and make sure they work, right? You can't just leave them like this. Actually, come to think of it, shouldn't you go down first, to check the electronics?" I could tell Bobby was just messing with Steve, but Steve was oblivious to that fact.
"Are you crazy? Like hell I'm going down there. No, just no. We should all be leaving."
Steve was yelling at Bobby, venting his pent-up fear. And the moment Steve stopped yelling, you could see he immediately regretted it, and swung his head around to the Transformers. But they underwent no changes. Rachel and I burst out laughing. Bobby was very good at this sort of thing, and we could both see how well he played Steve, getting him to vent that pent-up fear. Steve was now visibly more relaxed afterwards, and then he said with fake anger still in his voice,
"Fine, you go get yourself killed if you want. I'm staying up here."
Bobby turned to me with this smirk on his face. "You coming then?" Slung the rifle strap over his shoulder and climbed down the metal ladder. I holstered the pistol and followed right after him. Steve kept his flashlight fixed on the Transformers, while Rachel aimed hers in front of us so we could see where we were placing our feet. We approached the middle Transformer. We chose this one because while all three Transformers were covered in bodies, the middle one had a person standing at ground level, embracing the Transformer instead of floating or clinging halfway up it. We approached the body. It was a man's, dressed in a blue jumpsuit, the kind often worn by manual laborers. He was gripping so tightly onto the Transformer that his hands were bone white from the pressure, his face pressed tightly into the metal plates. As we approached him, I drew the pistol again, but this time I held it pointed down, ready to use if needed, but not immediately threatening. Bobby nodded at me and placed his hand on the man's shoulder. "Sir, are you okay?" No reply. Bobby pulled back on the man, but he barely moved. "Okay, we're doing this the hard way then." Bobby smirked and grabbed the man on both of his shoulders and pulled him back. He threw all of his weight into dragging the man away from the machine, pulling for a good 10 seconds before the man finally pulled away from it with a wet, sucking sound. The next moment, that thing twisted its body around and jumped onto Bobby. Bobby couldn't support the weight of this tackle and fell to the ground, his rifle knocked off his shoulder, sliding away into the distance. And the thing slammed its face into Bobby's neck with a wet, crunching sound. And then this red pool formed around his head. I was stunned for a second, but I quickly snapped back to my senses, aimed the gun at the person and fired 3 quick shots. Everything seemed to slow down. and I couldn't believe my eyes. 3 arcs of lightning shot out of the man and caught my bullets. They held for a short moment, and then the bullets went flying off into the darkness. And that thing raised its head and looked straight at me. His face was wrong, sunken, glowing orange eyes stared up at me. Its mouth was a perfect circle sunk into its face, filled with tiny but razor-sharp teeth, exactly like the mouth of a lamprey. And then I heard it, the sharp pinging sound of the bullet striking something, followed by a flash of light in the corner of the room, and sparks flew out, lighting the dark room. Those sparks kept flashing, and the dull hum coming from the room stopped. The bullet must have hit the cable carrying power to the transformers, cutting off the flow. And suddenly 20 pairs of glowing eyes were fixed onto me, filled with the deepest hunger. I bolted. I ran straight for the ladder. I could vaguely hear Rachel screaming something at me, but I kept running. I practically flew up the ladder. But when I got to the top, I was just going to keep running. But Rachel grabbed onto my wrist. I paused and looked back. Steve was gone. He must have ran away. I looked at Rachel, a second from yanking my hand back and continuing running. But she pointed back at the transformers. Only 4 pairs of eyes were still fixed on me. The rest were staring at the sparks on the wall. Now it's only 3 pairs. Several of those things slowly crawled down from the transformers, resembling a swarm of geckos on the prowl for insects. I was getting ready to run again, but instead they headed away from us, towards the sparks. And they slithered up the walls, reaching the sparkling cable. The mass of those things started to latch onto it, and the sparking stopped. But there wasn't enough space for all 20 of them, not on that short cable. The extras slithered down the wall again, but quickly vanished down another hallway, leaving the building, towards the area I assume held the pylons. And there were still 2 pairs of eyes on the transformers, 2 still staring right at me. Rachel shone the light down off of the transformers, returning to Bobby. The thing was still straddling his chest, face buried in his neck, red pool growing ever larger. I could tell Rachel was in shock, but she was trying to keep herself together. But her next word shocked me. "We need his keys." Oh, damn it. She was right. We would be trapped here without his car keys. I looked up, only seeing a single pair of eyes shining out against the darkness. Oh, okay. But how do we get them? How the hell do I know? Tears were leaking from her eyes, but I could see she was fighting to keep them back. I took a deep breath and looked out into the abyss beyond the railing, showing no remaining glowing orange orbs watching us. Okay. We get his keys, we get out and go get help. But how? Rachel was on the verge of breaking down. Okay, I'm gonna go down there, I'm gonna hit that thing in the head, and then it's just gonna chase me. You grab the keys, we meet at the car. I know it's a terrible idea, but those things are slow, right? Look at how they moved to the inlet. It was a slow crawl. When they left the room, it was slow. The only reason the thing caught Bobby at all was because he was already holding on to it, right? He was caught unprepared. We can do this. I was trying to sound as confident as possible, but I don't really think Rachel believed me. She was just staring at me with this look of horror. No ways. You will die. Do you have any other ideas? No. All right, then it's my plan. I turned back to the darkness. A faint moan echoed out again. I took another deep breath, trying hard to keep my hands from shaking, succeeding somewhat, and then slowly descended the ladder into the darkness. The beam of Rachel's flashlight was shining brightly above me, illuminating only the ladder, My nerves were going crazy. I could feel every inch of me screaming to run. And to not do this. But what choice did we have? I dismounted the ladder onto the floor, and Rachel followed down behind me. And she swung the light around the room, making sure nothing had changed since we started our descent. But everything seemed the same. We slowly approached the thing latched onto Bobby's neck, but it didn't move or make a sound. It acted just like it did when it was on the transformer. Rachel stayed behind, not too far from the ladder, as I approached it, but it didn't react at all. I moved a little bit to the left and grabbed Bobby's rifle where it had fallen. I walked up behind the creature, grabbed the rifle from the barrel like a baseball bat, and swung it down overhead towards the creature. But another bright arc of lightning flew out of the creature's shoulder, colliding with the rifle and flinging it from my hands towards the transformers, once again into darkness. I stared dumbly at the creature. This made no sense. It's not possible. But the creature just kept its face plastered into Bobby's neck. It didn't even notice me. I was thinking through my options, and I made a decision. One that put my damn stomach in my heart. I knelt down next to the thing, and slowly reached my hand out towards Bobby's pocket. My hand moved just past the thing's leg, into Bobby's pocket. I fumbled around for a while. Every second felt like an hour, and my fingers grasped onto the cold steel of his keys. And then it moaned. I froze. I thought it was over. But it didn't do anything else. I quickly backed away, slowly took my eyes off of the thing, and waved the keys at Rachel. And then she let out a blood-curdling scream. It was another one of those things. This time one that looked like a teen, wearing a school uniform, fell from the ceiling, right onto Rachel. It pinned her arms to the ground with ease, and slammed its gaping maw onto her neck, soon followed by the same red puddle. I froze. I couldn't think. I just stared at the scene for a good minute, feeling completely numb, not accepting the reality in front of me. And then the creature let out another low moan, and that snapped me back to reality. I took a deep breath and slowly tiptoed around the second creature, trying to get onto the ladder. And once my foot hit the first rung, I bolted, full speed. Next thing I knew, I was standing next to the car, out of breath and feeling the urge to spill the content of my stomach onto the tar. I threw open the car's door and jumped into the driver's seat. Now that I was somewhat safer, I took stock of everything, and I finally remembered Steve. I peered out the windscreen, searching for any sign of him, but there was nothing there. And I did something shameful, something I will never forgive myself for. I started the car and drove full speed out of there. I got home, locked myself in my bathroom, and wept. I couldn't help it. I lost my 3 best friends in one night. All for what? Keeping the lights on? I sat in the darkness of my bathroom for hours, clutching the pistol and flinching at every sound. Then around 6 a.m., the lights came back on. I stared at the ceiling. How? This should be impossible. I opened my phone and booted the power app. A notification on the app read, "A coupling failed at the substation. Maintenance has repaired the damage and restored power to the grid." I stared at the headline in disbelief. That's not possible. I couldn't understand what was going on. And eventually I passed out in the bathroom. I awoke later that day. The power was still on. I contemplated telling the police what happened, but would they even believe me? And probably not. What am I supposed to do with Bobby's car or pistol? I spent the next 2 days arguing with myself about what to do. I didn't understand what happened, so I didn't understand how to proceed. And then my phone beeped. National load shedding is suspended. No more power cuts for a while. I would normally be glad about this, but not this time. And then my phone rang. An unknown number. I reluctantly answered it. Hey Chris, it's Bobby. Dude, do you know where my car is? Bobby, you're alive? Yeah, duh. By the way, what happened yesterday? I don't remember anything. And I can't find my car or my phone. Dude, where are you? I'm at home. Where else would I be? Dude, are you okay? You sound stressed. Okay, I'll be there in 15 minutes. Don't move. I hung up the phone and immediately drove his car over to his house and rang the doorbell. Bobby sauntered out of his house with a strange smile on his face. He looked perfectly normal. More pale than usual, dark rings under his eyes. But all in all, he looked like a normal person to me. I jumped out of the car and gave him a massive hug. Dude, you're okay. Bobby let me hug him for a second and then said, Dude, this is pretty weird. Then I let go of him. How do you feel? Is everything okay? He was looking quite concerned at my strange behavior. Yeah, I'm good. Some maniac broke down my door while I was asleep, but they didn't take anything valuable, so I guess it's all good. Now, why do you have my car? I quickly made up a lie. You lent it to me, remember? He was puzzled, but accepted my lie. I guess that's fine. But what happened last night? I can't remember anything. And now apparently that was 3 days ago, and the boss is not happy about it. You really don't remember? Not at all. So I quickly made up a story. One about how we went drinking and then shooting some bottles at a lake. He lost his rifle into the water. He was pretty mad about that, but accepted it happened, and then vowed to go less hard on the booze. Rachel and Steve turned up with the same problem. Neither remember anything, and woke up at their homes with a broken door, and both accepted my story as truth. Things quickly returned back to normal, like nothing ever happened. And I was starting to question if maybe we actually just did really get some bad booze, and I dreamt up the whole adventure. And the more I thought it through, the more it made sense. So I started to accept that version as true. But then it happened. Load shedding started up again. Power would be going out again. That Friday I gave Bobby a call to arrange the logistics for our friend's night. But he didn't answer. I tried Rachel. No luck. Same with Steve. I was really worried, so I got an Uber and headed towards Bobby's house. I walked up to his front door and found it broken down from the inside out. He was gone. I then tried Steve's house, and then Rachel's. Same thing at both of them. They haven't reappeared yet, and I cannot find any traces of them. They're just gone. I don't know what to do or who to turn to, so I'm making this video. I need help. Somebody, anybody, please, tell me what's going on. Where are my friends?